Hello, everyone. We're going to talk about Browning Chapter 5. Let me go ahead and share here. Pull up the PowerPoint. Okay, there we go. Okay. The title of the chapter is Getting into the Grant Writing Game, Letters to Funders. Well, boy, what is this grant writing game that we're talking about? It's sort of, in a way, sort of like gamifying grant writing. Back to my point that I've made in various of these videos already, the most important point, the ultimate goal in most situations, I guess, not every situation, is really to get the grant. Okay. That is the ultimate goal. You get the grant, you win. You don't get the grant, you lose. I suppose is one way to look at it. And so that's really what the game is, really. The game is there's people giving money. There's always more people who want the money than those giving the money. So not everyone's going to get the money. And the one that gets the money is the one with the best ideas uh, or the best writer uh, or a combination of both of those, right? So that's really what it comes down to. And all the different review committees that I've ever been part of in reviewing grants, I've reviewed thousands of grants. It's always the unique idea, the great idea. Sometimes the writing isn't the best, but it's a wonderful idea, out of the box idea. Those things get funded sometimes. Obviously, then there's people who think that the idea is average, but the writing is stellar, superior, much better than average, and those sometimes get funded as well. And then there's those that have both that almost usually always get funded. So what we're going to be talking about here are the letter to the funders. Do you have to write letters before the grant? It could be a formal letter, an email. I communicate a lot through email, but writing letters to funders is really what you're trying to do is build a relationship with funders, people that are going to fund multiple projects, that are going to give you multiple grants. And so then there's time, the time invested in writing letters and building that relationship pays off because it's a relationship that you're going to have for quite a while that's going to fund a lot of your projects. And that's really what we're talking about here in chapter 5. So why do these letters matter? Many funders prefer letters before full proposals, right? And sometimes they ask you for those letters, sometimes they don't. When they don't, I would be very hesitant to try to say too much in those letters, right? Because they also, in many ways, are guided by their own ethics policies and building these relationships with people prior to funding them. Sometimes that's sort of not looked upon as very well, right? Building relationships once you have the funding, I think that's great. So when you actually get funding, all those quarterly reports you have to submit, all those sometimes the meetings you have to have with all your funders, those things, that's really where you build the relationship. But beforehand, I think it's okay, but I think you also want to, be cautioned to not try to overdo it. Okay. Letters, they screen projects efficiently when they ask for them, right? I've had some that are very extremely complicated grants, but they want maybe one or two letters explaining the grant. That's really what we're talking about here. They want to know whether they're going to invite you into stage two, right? I should have pulled up a grant that I recently consulted on that had like stage one and stage two, and stage one only took like a couple of days to write. Stage two, if you get into stage two, if you get invited, that's going to take a couple of weeks. And so there are levels to it too. And strong letters also increase invitation rates. What they're talking about is those grants that sometimes have two levels, right? The first level is sort of like a screening level. And if you get past that, doesn't mean you have the grant, just means that you've been invited to submit a full grant now. And sometimes I've even been consulting and part of consultant on certain grants where you get paid to work on these grants when you make it to the second level. Okay, not the first level. Generally, I've never seen where you get actually paid to work on that first level, but I have seen many situations where you do get paid when you're invited to work on that second. It's not a lot of money, maybe 5, 10, 15K, but there is some money for that sometimes. Sometimes. Okay. What they want to read is who you are, not you as an individual, but you as an organization, as a school district. What does that mean? Who are you? That means, what is the personnel? What is the strength of the personnel? Who are your clients? What is your mission and your vision, and what do you want to do? And what problems will you solve? Right? Are you dealing with like a gang problem? Are you dealing with a mental health issue? Are you dealing with urban kids not getting to see the outdoors? There's all kinds of things. Sometimes there's things out there that you don't even know that you could benefit from until you see it, and you're like, yeah, that I wasn't thinking about that, but I could surely benefit from that. And why does your project, why your project fits their priorities? Remember, they always have priorities. They have a mission as well. That's what you have to really understand, what their mission is and how you fit your own work into that mission. Okay. So for formatting these letters, yeah, definitely using overhead, 1 page, don't go over 1 page, 12-point font, generally either Times New Roman or Arial are really the main ones. And then having wide margins, 1-inch margins with a lot of readable space, maybe, 1.5 sort of spacing, that type of thing. Okay. You introduce the organization, pretty quickly, but that's where you start. Importantly, when was it founded? When was it created? How long has it been around? Right. That's definitely something to start with right away. And how has it grown over the years? What is the size? How many people? How many clients? That type of thing. And when I say clients, I mean essentially students. Right. Okay. What are the unmet needs? And creating a strong first impression, but keeping it professional for sure. Okay. You have to have the date, address, the correct greeting, professional greeting, and then also an opening paragraph that's going to state the intent of what you're trying to do. Right. What is your intent? Okay. The middle paragraph is going to ask, how much money you're requesting, right? How your project is going to have impact. And when you talk about impact, you have generally 3 levels of impact. You have short-term, medium-term, and long-term impact. So let's look at an issue of you're trying to address gang membership, right? An immediate impact may be that the kids are not hanging out at the park anymore, right? They're not hanging out with the bad crowd. They're not being recruited. Medium impact may be that those kids maybe have community college or 4-year college aspirations, and long-term impact is that perhaps that those kids want to maybe go to college, graduate, and come and have the similar type of impact on your community, right? And how do you measure that? When you have impact, you have to have measurement, and we'll talk about that when we talk about measurement. But really, for the letter, and it's for writing a letter, you just need to be aware that there are short, medium, and long-term impact. Okay. And they look for that, and generally they will ask about that when they ask you for a logic model, which a lot of grants do. They're going to ask you to list not the impact, but the impacts, plural. Okay. Identifying the agency by name as well. Right. Okay. Closing the letter, thanking the funder, restating how the alignment with their priorities, and then using a professional closing. Okay, letter of inquiry. This is really like a mini concept paper. It's used by many foundations, and as we talked about earlier, all the different levels of funding from the very top to the bottom. At the very top, they're much more complex, require a lot more evaluation, but they give you a lot more money. That's the federal government. The next level is the state of California. The next level, if you're in Fresno, it's be like Fresno County or Madera County. Might be the counties, right? The next level at that might be the cities. City of Fresno, city of Madera, whatever. And the next level, well, depending on the foundation, maybe like a foundation, a private foundation, a public foundation, that type of thing. Okay. And it also, you determine the invitation, they determine your invitation to submit the full proposal. Okay. All right, the letter of invitation, is that what LAI? Letter of inquiry, sorry. Letter of inquiry structure, introduction to the organization, brief project description, the target population, and this is where you have to use data, right? If it's a school, district, a community, a city, a county, you have data. It's publicly available. The census has data. Uh, there's another site, I think it's called Kids Data, I believe. They have data that you could tailor for your specific needs, but you are going to need some data. Even as I talked about in the previous video, I pull, like 50 different pieces of data and I write 2 sentences, right? You still need the whole concept of all of the data to know what you're going to say. And it's going to help you if you get invited to write the full grant or to write another grant. So having that data is very extremely important. And then also the request amount, right? The request amount. Sometimes as foundations, they don't require matching funds, right? Sometimes the state, a lot of times, those that are mostly that I've seen that require matching funds are the state. What are matching funds? So say you're asking for $1 million, say, we're asking for $1 million, but we're also going to, this project costs $2 million. If you give us $1 million, we already have the other $1 million. And you don't probably have $1 million lying around. You have it in your infrastructure, your buildings, the rent, you already have all the materials, you have the people already. You have already the infrastructure for, paying them, their employees, all of those things, all of that infrastructure, everything that you have, you might already have, if you're going camping, you might already have the camping equipment. All of that has a dollar attached to it, and all of it together can be added up to say, these are the matching funds that I have. I have $1 million and I need 1 more million to make it 2 million. Okay. But when you request the amount, sometimes you may want to say that yeah, we were asking for $1 million and we already have $1 million. Okay. The letter proposals are used by corporations or small foundations. They're shorter than the full proposals and they focus really on the clarity and the fit between, their mission and your mission, essentially. Okay, writing less, right? Funders have really limited time to read these. They get a lot of them. Okay, like the one that's really popular here in the Valley is the Wonderful grants. These grants, I think they're only $50,000, but it's probably like one of the most competitive grants that I know because almost everybody that I know applies for this. They can give out maybe, 100 of those. And you probably have, maybe 2,000 applications. I don't know. It's a lot. Everybody that I know, I've never met somebody who didn't apply for those Wonderful grants. Okay. So the funders have very, limited time. Concise writing is valued, and then you also avoid unnecessary details and telling them things that aren't you got to stay really focused in on what you want to tell them. Okay, key elements to the letter is the problem statement, the purpose statement, and the goals, the timeline, right? The timeline, you could start this project right away. You're ready to start. It's a shovel ready, as they say, project. The project, I need this for 3 years. It's a 3-year project, 2-year project, 5-year project. And then these are the community partners that I have that are going to be participating through volunteer work or however it is that you're going to be using your community partners. Okay, evaluation and sustainability, as I talked about earlier, evaluation, the larger the money, the more evaluation needed. Explaining how success is going to be measured. Okay, qualitative, quantitative, surveys, focus groups, interviews, those are the details, the design, right? The research design is really what is going to sort of propel or what's going to tell them what the evaluation is. Describing how the results are going to be shared, right? Social media, community presentations. How is it, right? Especially if it's a community project, right? And there's a lot of community people involved and they're volunteering and they're helping. How are you going to share the results with them? Okay. Addressing sustainability after funding, right? A lot of them want to know, they even ask you that. How do you plan to sustain this project once the funding runs out? You're asking for $2 million, but when the money's over, what do? You got to send everybody home. There's nothing you can do to continue that project. No money, no project. They want to know, what are you going to do to try to get resources from somewhere else to continue the work, right? You have to have some sort of plan, and that's called sustainability. Okay. After you submit, you just got to wait. Sometimes generally in a lot of the RFQs or NOFOs, they tell you, hey, say it's February, applications are due February, and they're going to be reviewed in March and April, and you'll hear from us, May or June, something like that. Usually not that big. They're usually a lot more specific, but I would say don't contact them beforehand. Remember, they have a lot of applications, okay? But it's okay to send an email. If they say June 15th, you should know, and you haven't heard, it's probably okay to contact them and say, yeah, just checking in on my application. There's nothing wrong. I just say don't contact them before that. I would wait, until then. And if they say it's going to take us another month, and wait another month. It is, even though you do need the money, and it's important. The money's important to start the project, and you're counting on it. You're putting a lot of eggs in that basket. You still have to be very patient. Okay. Remember, they're working as hard as they can, and you have to try to put yourself in their shoes and know they probably are taking long because they have hundreds of applications they have to go through, more than they expected, maybe. Okay. And don't assume rejection quickly. Just because you haven't heard by the time they say you should hear doesn't mean that you're not rejected until they say you're rejected. Okay. Track all correspondence, emails, have a central person, the person leading the grant team that's going to be potentially the one communicating, so that everybody knows what's being said to the people that you're trying to get funding from. Okay, if you receive good news, acknowledge the funder promptly, prepare the appreciation materials, and then maintain good communication. If you receive bad news, seek feedback, adjust and then resubmit, right? Especially if they say you were really close, take that feedback, make the changes, and wait for the next round of funding and resubmit it again. Okay, treat funders as they're your partners, right? Treat them with respect. Remember, these are the ones holding the purse strings. Share your progress and your outcomes through the quarterly reports. Almost always everybody requires those. And build long-term relationships. All right. Okay, letters are going to improve your funding success. Not going to guarantee it. They're going to improve it. Not all the funders want, full proposals. And then also follow the funder's preferences very carefully. Seek administrative approval. Use an editor before submission, and have the whole team also make sure to read it for editing purposes, and track all letters and responses. Okay. So questions for you to reflect on is, how can letters save time and effort? Which funders require letters first? And how will you track correspondence? Okay. Important things to think about. Okay, and next we're going to talk about preparing full grant proposals, aligning narratives and budgets, and building proposal momentum. I did want to show you one thing here. Okay. Let me see. Let me do this share. This is going to be. Is it just one? Let me see. Okay, let's try that one. Okay, this is very typical of these webinars that sometimes they require. I've been seeing less and less requirement, but sometimes before you even apply, they require you to go to a webinar. The webinar explains the grant. This one here was a HCI grant, the Department of Healthcare Access and Information. It's called Community-Based Organizations Behavioral Health Workforce Grant Program. This is to improve the workforce and behavioral health, right? And so this is typically how it goes. They present all the information related to the grant, how the grant's going to work. Here's another one. Let me see here. Okay, here's another one. This one is Disaster Supplemental Notice of Funding Opportunity, the Webinar 2 Readiness Path, right? And again, sometimes these are required, sometimes they're optional. That's a very, very important detail. If it's required that you go to that webinar before applying, you got to make sure that you're there. Somebody has to go there. And again, there's less of them. I'm seeing less of them. That's not the trend, but doesn't mean that some of them aren't going to require you to be at that webinar. Okay. All right. And so this explains really all aspects of the grant. Okay. All right. Okay. And that is it for Browning Chapter 5. I hope you're enjoying, the different chapters and moving forward on your grant and your assignments.